Fantasy football drafts right around the corner here, and here's a few tight ends I'll consider sleepers going into fantasy drafts. The first guy is Irv Smith Jr. of the Minnesota Vikings. So Irv Smith Jr. he should be the number one tight end this season over there in Minnesota. Kyle Rudolph left in free agency and went to the New York Giants. So we saw flashes last season, especially at the goal line and the red zone area here, where Irv Smith Jr. was a big target and a reliable target for Kirk Cousins and this Minnesota offense. So right here, last season, 30 catches, 365 yards, 5 receiving touchdowns, a 2-point conversion on 43 targets for Irv Smith Jr. This season, if he's healthy and he plays all the games, and as a starter as well, I think he can reach 600 or 700 yards with 5 to 8 touchdown range. And right now, he's going anywhere from 10th to the 12th round here is Irv Smith Jr. I think he's going to be a good player for this Minnesota Viking team, and I think he could get the job done, and I'd rather wait later in drafts for him than some of these guys that they're overrating and ranking too high, in my opinion. So Irv Smith Jr. is definitely a sleeper I'm targeting going into drafts this season. The next tight end is Mike Kasich of the Miami Dolphins. So Mike Kasich, he showed good flashes of last season. Next tight end is Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. So Gesicki, he had a couple good games last season, but that was mostly with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and obviously Fitzpatrick's out of town now, and he went to the Washington football team. So Tua Tagovailoa and Gesicki had a couple decent games together last season. As total last year, 53 catches, 703 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns and 85 targets. So that's a solid season last year for Gesicki. And here, some people compare him to Travis Kelce, but I don't think he's no Travis Kelce. And obviously, he don't even have a quarterback even close to Travis Kelce. But this season, the projections are 820 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns here for Gesicki. So we'll see if he could have a good year again this season here. Right now, he's on the COVID list, but he should be back and ready for the regular season and week 1. And right now, he's ranked 116 going into drafts, and I think that's a good range of getting him as well, anywhere from the 10th to the 12th round in most fantasy leagues he's been going. And this guy, he definitely could have some big games, and then there's games where he's going to be inconsistent. But right now, I think he's a good get and a sleeper here on his average ADP going into drafts. The next tight end is Jared Cook of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Cook, it seems like every season or every other season, he changes teams, and now he lands with the Los Angeles Chargers. And last year wasn't a good year with him without Drew Brees over there in New Orleans. And he finished the year 37 catches, 504 yards, 7 touchdowns on 60 targets with a fumble loss. And now he joins a good offense over there in Los Angeles with Justin Herbert behind quarterback. And this kid Herbert, he likes the tight ends, he likes hitting the receivers. And the Chargers, they'll probably be trailing a lot in ball games of this season, where a lot of throwing attempts by Herbert and a lot of targets for Cook. So I think Cook has a better season this year than last. And last season, the only good thing he got out of it, he did have 7 touchdowns here. And I could see him get those 7 touchdowns, and let's add maybe 200 or 300 more yards to his total. I could see him anywhere from 700 to 800 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns possibly for Jared Cook. And right now, he's a guy going undrafted in some fantasy leagues. So if you really want to wait late in your league and get Cook in one of the last rounds of your drafts, you definitely could do that, in my opinion. And I think this guy could put up pretty decent numbers at the tight end spot. And we know we've seen what he's done in his past. He's not a scrub. He's capable of being good. And I think Jared Cook could be a good sleeper at the tight end position this season. The next tight end's Anthony Fursker of the Tennessee Titans. So John Smith, he left town and went to the New England Patriots with a big free agent contract. So Fursker looks like the starter over there in Tennessee. And Fursker, in a couple games last season, we saw some big games out of him, filling in for John when he was a little banged up. So last year, 39 catches, 387 yards, and a touchdown on 53 targets for Fursker. So Fursker, he's another player going later in drafts, or even going undrafted like Jared Cook in the later rounds. So right here, I think he's got potential. And let's be honest, this Tennessee Titan offense is loaded right now. And Fursker is one of the last guys defenses are going to worry about and prepare for, with Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Derrick Henry on this offense. So right here, Fursker, he could be an under-the-radar tight end this season, where It wouldn't surprise me to see him have 7 or 8 touchdowns, possibly with 600 yards, which is still a pretty decent season, especially for the tight end position, which is pretty weak outside the top 5 guys in fantasy football and inconsistent. So right here, I could see a decent year for Furska because teams aren't going to be paying attention to him, and this Tennessee passing attack's going to be a great one, in my opinion. So Furska is definitely a sleeper going into drafts, and the fifth and final tight end I have as a sleeper going into fantasy drafts this season is Eric Ebron of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Ebron, he showed some flashes last year with the Steelers. Like Anthony Furska, Eric Ebron's in an offense where many defenses, they're not going to pay attention or game plan for him this season. When you got Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and now you got Najee Harris in the mix as well as their bell cow running back there this season. So Ebron, a lot of passes down the middle we're going to see for him, and a lot of red zone targets as well, in my opinion, here for Ebron this season. Last season, 56 catches, 558 yards, 5 touchdowns, 91 targets, and a 2-point conversion. So decent stats for Ebron, and I could see him easily match those stats this season or even pass those stats. And right now, he's been going undrafted in a lot of fantasy leagues here, is Ebron. So if you really, really want to wait towards the end of your draft, then you go out there and get Eric Ebron late in your draft. So right here, I think he's a good sleeper, and he's definitely a guy that could put up production in this Steeler offense. So that's a few tight ends I have as sleepers heading into fantasy drafts in the next few weeks.